Welcome back to the Dr. Kirsten Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen, and today we are going to talk about something that really resonated with everyone over on Instagram. And it's really diving into if you feel like you're someone that is constantly doing everything for everyone, trying to show up for yourself too, but you still feel unseen and unsupported. I'm here to tell you that you are not broken, although that might be something that you think often. And you're likely running a you're likely running a hidden pattern that I know very well. And I'm going to show you today how I really moved through it and broke through that without burning everything to the ground. I was, for context, as we dive in today, I was really feeling like I do a lot for everyone. And I don't mean this in like a, oh, woe is me standpoint, okay? Because this is really important that we look at how we get here, why we get to these places, and what is happening in our own internal space that's making us feel this way. Because in some senses, it also does a lot for us as well, right? Like, for example, when people come to me with like the things that they need help with, there is a part of it that feeds this like, oh, I'm needed, right? Oh, people want to talk to me, right? So there's always, in many cases, there's a reason why we have the things that we have in our life. They are doing something for us positive or negative. They are there because we underneath it all want them to be there, kind of. But I felt in this sense that I was just doing so much, and showing up in so much. And I know that this resonates with moms because it's just one of those life positions, right, that we end up in that just has a lot of that. Like there are a lot of things that come back to you and you being there and you being present and you being that role that you're in that role of being a parent, but also then trying to show up for me, which again can be very, very difficult depending on, the ages of your kids and finding time for yourself and navigating that with relationships and partnerships. But then also on that side, I also felt like even though I was doing all of these things for myself and for other people, I felt like really like no one was really showing up for me in the same way. Now, please note, right? Like I'm going to show you how I shifted out of this pattern into something that works way better. Um, because we do really need, but first, in order to get there, we really need to talk about how we got here. But this is a pattern. And as you're going to see as this unfolds here and really towards the end, so stick around. But ultimately, what we're really looking at here is that what's happening on the inside is being projected. There is a reality that is being created based on our perception, right? So oftentimes if we're focusing on what other people are or are not doing, it's because there is something that we are or are not doing something like for ourselves. We are believing something that is then creating that on the outside. If that's confusing, don't worry, we're going to talk all about it. So, first, just to really share how this was really showing up. And for context, I also see this all the time with my private clients and people that I work with. So I'm sharing this from personal experience, but also because I know it will resonate and because I know that it resonates with a lot of my clients and the stories that, they bring to their appointments as well. But really, where I was coming from is that I really felt like I was carrying a lot of the mental load and I was holding space for, everyone's like emotions and their needs and a tendency that I do have as someone who used to really be in the pattern of going into the doing, right? Like in order to avoid feeling, in order to avoid the challenges and the problems and the struggles, I would just do more, right? What am I missing? What do I need to do more of? Why do I not have what I want? What do I need to do in order to get what I want? And it always comes full circle. because there always are things in some ways that we need to do, but they're not always what you think the doing needs to be. And this is where the journey gets fun, I would say. But not to get too lost there, I was very much so the kind of person that would push through, right? Even when I was falling apart, when everything around me was falling apart, I would grind, put my head down, and just do more, push harder. I just had to do more to make it through. And because of all of that, like I felt so alone. And I know because I've heard this from so many moms that they feel the same way. And even when people did offer me help, so right, this is really important because even when people did offer me help, there were so many times where I just pushed it away or I didn't believe that I could receive it because ultimately I thought that I had to prove to myself and everyone that I was strong, that I was capable by doing all of it. And one of the things that we talk about is that, underneath so many of the reasons why people don't have what they want is because in some way, shape, or form, they either don't believe that they're worthy and that they deserve to have it, or that they are capable of having it. Like, I can't do this, right? Or, oh, maybe this is just something that isn't for me. Or, oh, but if I were to get that thing, I don't really deserve that. I don't deserve to have that, right? The pattern, this whole pattern of where this comes from begins through giving. And it does come, I think this is really important. This does come from a place of love and kindness in many, many, many ways. But it can get a little sideways when you end up overextending, over functioning, right? Which ultimately then leads you to feeling like you carry all of the mental load, that you hold space for everyone's needs and still feel like no one is holding you because you might also be prioritizing the self-care, right? You might be doing the meditations and the journaling and going and getting exercise and doing all of those things, right? You're doing all of the self-care. But ultimately, because you still feel like no one is doing that for you, and showing up in that way for you and holding that space in that way for you, it can lead to so much resentment. That voice, behind you that's like, well, he did that. Why? And I did that for him. Like, why didn't he do that for me? Right? Or why didn't they do that for me? Whatever it is, right? And ultimately, like where all of that leads is really to just feeling like you're on your own. And again, as I mentioned before, like I used to double down on this, right? Like I used to push harder, I used to grind harder, I would just do more. But every single time that cycle would just lead to burnout and it would just repeat over and over and over again. And it led to anxiety, it led to depression, it led to a lot of those, low energy, fatigue, low symptoms that felt so bad. And now ultimately I see these as moments, as opportunities, right? I see them as places for me to learn, right? The challenges, the really, really difficult situations, I see them as opportunities for me to really just see like why would this be here at this time for me right now? Like what is it that I need to learn from what's happening here? But instead of, so in order to do that, right, you're not continuing to ignore it and avoid it by pushing through, but you're stopping to say, okay, if this were here for me, what would it be trying to teach me? If you need to rewind that, I would, because that is a very, very key point to why so many people don't have what they want, why you feel stuck, why you feel like nothing's working, like you're not getting anywhere, like you're spinning your wheels. The place where this really heads to, right, is that we have to start looking deeper. I'm a big fan of tools and using things to help us shift what's going on in our mental and emotional world so that, and to feel it and ground it through the body, because that's how we move things through and actually learn what we need to learn and get rid of and release and unlearn so much. But we have to get down to the root underneath where those patterns come from. And part of what we do and how we do that is we have to identify what are those underlying beliefs that are driving the external result. The real pattern here wasn't about how much that I was doing. It was about what I believed underneath all of the doing. And so I had this belief that it was like, I have to do and figure out all of this myself. That was that core belief, right? That was driving the overgiving, the over functioning, and ultimately the burnout and leading, allowing that to just come up over and over and over again, right? Like this belief fueled so much of my life and how I have gotten to where I am today. But it also has led to, again, so many of the burnout cycles because when you deep down believe that you're alone, that you have been like abandoned, right? And that while there may be support around you, you still overfunction and push past your limits. So you turn down offers to help because really, like what you are ultimately trying to do is prove to yourself that you're capable and that you're worthy, which you only actually believe when you've earned it. And then, and then you start to wonder why your body feels like it's shutting down. These beliefs are learned through childhood. They're learned through different roles that were modeled to us. They are conditioning from society, from culture, from where we grow up, from where we were educated, and the people that played a large role in our life. These beliefs get learned between 0 and 8 years old, and then they make up what is our subconscious mind, which then continues to build evidence of the things that we learned. The best part about that, though, is that because they were learned, it also then means that they can be unlearned and that they can be rewired and we can learn something new and something different. This is the process of taking the things that are happening in your life from the subconscious, unconscious, they are just happening to actually getting into a place where they become a conscious choice, a conscious decision, a conscious way of living, where no longer are you just playing out these automatic default reactions. And instead, now you are moving to a place where you are responding, but you are responding from a place that is whole, that is healed, that is you, not the parts of you, the fragments of you, the beliefs that were not meant, that maybe were meant for you in order to get you to this place for you to learn, but to really get back to who you are and to being able to trust those feelings, to trust that inner voice, that self. That is really like where these journeys come from, right? And it ultimately, like, that is when we are responding, when we are engaging in our life from that empowered and embodied place, it is a very, very different place to live from because you are now actively creating what you want in your life versus being we some people call it victim to or in effect or things are just happening to you. This starts to become, oh, not only can things be happening for me, but in a on all of that they actually can be guiding me to create what I actually say that I want. These could be just showing me where I still have a lot more work to do so that I can actually get what I say that I want. The really interesting thing with all of this is that one thing that I mentioned is that a lot of people go through these kinds of patterns and are living out these patterns in their life. And they just are oftentimes wondering like why their body is shutting down, why it doesn't feel good, why it's saying no, because it's forced you to stop, because it needs you to listen. So what we get are patterns of like nervous system dysregulation. We get resentment, we get burnout, we get chronic symptoms and chronic disease and chronic illnesses and autoimmune conditions, right? These places where self turns on self, where we lose, not only do we not have boundaries and know where we don't know where we end and where other people and where external source people and influences begin, but we lose boundaries. These people pleasing, the perfectionism, anxieties, depression, these mental and emotional conditions, right, that really make it hard to live in our current existence. In many ways, these are the costs of these patterns, living out what they're that it's again that default, right? That automatic response, that subconscious living that is playing out as symptoms in your actual physical body currently, right? And they are literally, and in many cases, for many women and for many people that are, if you're still listening, like you probably align with this in some way, shape, or form. But this is from that loop of that like over functioning, the emotional avoidance, ignoring the things that we don't want to look at through the pattern, right? Of like people who were taught that emotions are unsafe have you likely or may have learned you either dissociate and ignore it completely, or you leave your body, right? You just dissociate from it completely, or you go into an overdoing mode. Because if you overfunction, you fix the thing, then you don't have to deal with the emotions and the big emotions and the things that are sometimes really painful and hard to work through. That loop, though, as it plays out, it disconnects you from what is actually going on in your body, what your body is trying to communicate with you. So, and especially too, if you're someone who, as a high achiever or someone who considers themselves like highly capable, right? When someone offers then to help or to offer support, it can feel really unsafe when your identity is one that is centered around being the capable one, the one that can do all of the things. Do you see how this starts to really loop itself now, where you can just kind of get stuck in this spiral of like, even though you're doing all of the things, right? Doing all of the things to regulate and fix the physical body. Again, the term fix your physical body. You're doing all the things to fix it when actually the thing that you actually need to do is not look at it as a thing of doing and fixing, but actually as a way of returning, of starting to listen, of starting to pay attention and just again, either stopping or slowing down or just taking that breath to pay attention to what is going on in the body, what is here for you to learn. That might sound very weird. It could sound very woo. It could sound very like, okay, but how, why, where's your proof, you know? But I think deep down to the people who really understand and who I would say this from really, what I find is that the people who have gone through I would say really, really hard things in life, or who are going through a health journey, like a chronic health condition where you have put your, like you have gone through a ringer, you have spent years, sometimes decades of not getting answers, of trying a lot of things. This starts to make a lot of sense. This starts to make a lot of sense. So what do you do? You know, like how do you get out of this pattern, right? So part of it is that we kind of go through this process, and I'm going to walk you through what this looks like. And I'm going to do it in the terms of really what I experienced and how I just recently went through, like something to work through, just because I think that's really, really helpful as like an example. But this is, I was considering like, do I do this from the perspective of like a client that I had and like their story and what came up for them? But I really felt like maybe this was just where my own story really should just come through here. But again, I see this all the time with clients, right? This is essentially the pattern that we work through is that you first off have to understand or notice the behavior that is causing the thing that you don't want to have and really working that down to getting to that root belief of like, okay, where is that coming from? And then going through a process of rewiring it, creating new circuitry to getting it into something that you want now. And in that process of the letting go, of the releasing, of the letting go of emotions and releasing the negativity and the trauma or whatever it is that's been stored in the body, you are at the same time resetting your nervous system. And that is very important, which you're going to hear in just a little bit. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more. But when this happens, this is when the shifts start to happen so much easier. And sometimes there is a gap to doing the work and getting the results that you want, but the process in between, while it may have a lot of grappling and like trying to figure out like what else do I need to learn? What's going on here? And it has this like you're working through something, you still at the same time notice that things do feel different. They are different. You have changed in some way, which then means that getting the result that you want in many cases is almost inevitable, provided that it aligns with your purpose and like where your journey is meant to go, like that that result that you are wanting is inevitable because you are changing, you are becoming the identity of the person who has what you want. So putting this all into context so you can kind of ground in it a little bit more. So I was uh looking for an example of something that happened in my life where I could kind of explain a little bit more of like the behavior that kind of led to the belief and then how we rewired that. So, I was doing, gosh, and it's always sometimes so hard to identify what the specific behavior was, but I knew that what I was currently doing was I was constantly leaning into doing more, right? To avoid and ignore how I was feeling. What I really needed to do though, and it's so hard for me, this is something that I work on consistently. And it is becoming easier. I will say that. But like I do have to consciously make choices that help me through this old pattern. But I was just not wanting to face the thing that was in front of me. And even though I was asking, I was like, what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? There's very clearly something here because I don't have what I want. I just wasn't getting the answer that I was expecting to get. I was getting the answer, but I just wasn't listening, right? I wasn't paying attention. I didn't want necessarily to see it, or at that time, it wasn't quite ready for me to see yet. But really, what needed to happen was I really needed to feel what I was feeling. I needed to identify where it was being stored in my body so that then I could create new neurons and new circuitry, right? What I mean by that is that if you have a challenge right now that you are living with or currently experiencing, if you tune into where it is in the body, it will likely be in some spot. It will be in some area. Like it could be your gut or your chest. Lots of people say, oh, it's just really heavy. It's tight in my chest. Could be in your throat or your head, right? You tend to feel it in certain areas. So when you feel it and when you tune into it, it just become you can sense where it's being stored. That's what I mean. So then when you have that, then that's when you can start shifting things through with different breathing, patterns with love, light, but also taking the opportunity to say, okay, what is it here that I need to learn? And so I trace it back to the belief that, I have to do everything myself. And I've worked on things like this before, but this one had a different layer. And deep down, I was this again, layers upon layers upon layers. I've done so much work, right, around I am capable and I am worthy and those being a part of my belief systems. But I really do believe that there are just layers that we encounter as we learn new things, right? The next part of our journey. Um, I knew that this belief was constantly coming from proving to myself, right? And others, but to myself that I am worthy and that I am capable of doing and having what I want. And ultimately, all of that to say that it was really coming through that needed, I was coming back to love. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But the magic of this here really is that the nervous system finds safety. It finds safety when the old stored negative emotions and beliefs are released. This is so important because when you regulate the nervous system, which helps you move forward towards health and well-being, which also, by the way, creates a new default where it isn't more work, that is such the key that when your nervous system is safer, when it is feeling regulated, when it feels secure, because it's not running these old patterns, these old beliefs that it learned in order to feel safe and secure. When you rewire that belief, it might look like something to start that's like, oh, I am worthy, I am capable, I am worthy of receiving support. But really, what this can look like is as you go into those deeper layers, it might start looking like something like, oh, this is actually learning unconditional love, accepting love, receiving love, and ultimately learning to love myself and who I am unconditionally, right? Who am I? It's those journeys of coming to really recognizing who we are and who we are meant to be. Notice, though, how where this started, right, was on this focus of it seemed like it was everyone else who was the problem. Like I felt alone because they weren't reciprocating. But ultimately, in so many ways, it actually comes down to me. Because remember, this is so important, that everything that we are perceiving in our reality is often a reflection of what's going on inside us, right? In our own internal world. It's like it's a mirror, it's a part of the path of the journey of learning. Every challenge, every struggle in so many ways is here for us to learn. A perspective that I'm really leaning into a lot recently is that if this challenge were placed here by me, right? God, a higher version of me, a future version of me, or whatever, that absolutely wants the best for me, could call this God as well if that suits you. Then, out of love, why would this be happening for me right now? What would this be here to teach me? And recently, like I've realized that it was always about learning more about who I am, right? And what I'm here to do, about loving who I am and bringing out the parts of me that I buried deep down because they didn't fit inside the box that was the high achiever, the doctor, you know, fill in the blanks, right? And I will say this also, but for perspective and for transparency, right? That like I really have thought about this journey and reflected on how I healed from endometriosis and migraines, and really where that journey started and how we got to where we are today, having literally no pain, right? And I don't get migraines anymore. And I really like physical health wise, I've and I've spoken to this before, but like I am healed. Like I have not only that, but I am also a healer, right? But like these are uh that is a process that has happened. And that is very much so in my past. Um, but I realized as I was reflecting on this journey that I have healed so many different areas of my life. And I think this is an interesting perspective to kind of look at this. But like when people say they want something, like they want to transform their life in some way because they don't want to be in pain anymore. They don't want to have the physical, the problems that they have currently. I sometimes bring up the life coaching wheel, and for some of you who are familiar, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't, you can look it up on Google, a quick Google search. You could do like 8 life areas or life coaching, 8 life areas or life coaching wheel. And what you're going to find is that the wheel basically has different sections, right? So it's like health and fitness, friends and family is another section of the wheel, right? Love and relationships, finances and wealth, personal and spiritual development, career and business, your physical environment. And they can shift and change depending, but it's things and themes like that, right? And they do shift depending on who you're looking at and like what different businesses are out there that have like published it. But what I realized is that over time, I've been slowly working towards healing in those various areas. So, like, if you were to go around right now and go from like 0 to 10, rating 10 being like, oh my gosh, it's like literally the best it's ever been, 0 being like it's the lowest it's ever been, and you were to rate your life currently in each of those areas, where would you rate it? What you probably will find is that there are several that are lower than the others. And those are the areas where you may need to focus a lot more of this attention on, like, what are the beliefs? What are the stored, conditioning and patterns that are playing out right now that are creating the physical reality of what I have currently, right? And I realized that it really finally sank in that not only have I been on a journey to heal, but I've really been on that journey to really completely change and transform my life. That is ultimately what helped to heal my body because it reconnected me with like energy and the spiritual world, like the that God and that part, like not to get so high up there, but I do think it's really important because what I've realized is that the clients who have worked with me and who've stayed with me long term and who have really ultimately created what they wanted, right? The health, wealth, healthy relationships, joy, success in their life, like all of those things, they ultimately wanted to completely transform their life. They wanted to change at the deepest levels, right? At the identity level. Now, do you need all of those things in order to get, like, let's say, be healthy? No. But what I do think happens is that on the way, a lot of those other things are tied into the reason why we don't have what we want. And so then they are a part of the process, right? And especially for me, like once the health things started to get better and I didn't have those symptoms anymore, then I started realizing, like, okay, here are some of the areas that obviously I am now at cause. I can change and create the life that I want. Here's what I want to do now, right? And so then it just continues to go on from there. And I really ultimately believe that that is what healing looks like on the deepest levels, because it's not just a functional or integrative medicine perspective, right? It's ultimately like transformational medicine. It is changing and transforming your life. And I have a tool for you that I think is really helpful to get started, and they're very popular and people love them. I have one for you. And while I do find that those are very helpful, like the journaling prompts and all of those things, I do find that they are very powerful and helpful. and we use them inside of all of my programs, right? Like all of the things that we do to rewire beliefs, they're all tools and to integrate parts and to do inner child work and like all of those things. They are all a part of, they are all tools. But the thing that is actually happening is that you are changing on a deeper level. And that is what ultimately needs to be addressed, right? Because it's not just about fixing yourself like, oh, let's just apply a tool and then the whole problem will go away. But in this perspective, right, of everything that we've talked about here, but this could literally be like cut and paste anything into this. In this perspective, it wasn't just about fixing myself, right? It was about remembering my worth and my value without the overdoing and the overfunctioning. And then the giving that happens comes from a place that is not from self-sacrifice, but because it's coming from a place of overflow and because it's coming from that place of love, fully and completely unconditional love. That is changing at the identity, at the root level. And that is then what comes from the deeper work. So, I created a tool that guides you through a part of this process, right? It takes you through identifying what the behavior is, what needs to be changed and rewired, and you get to experience that feeling of the nervous system starting to regulate, right? Where we get you out of, at least just take the steps to get out of burnout and that feeling that you're in right now of that just like something needs to change. It's a really powerful 6-part reframe, and it's a meditation that helps you gently shift the belief that you have to do it all yourself. Okay. And and actually, it can really shift anything. If this, I mean, you're here and you're listening to this still. So I would imagine that this is resonating. But if you are still here and it's not necessarily your thing, but you're like, yeah, I'm tracking, like this is, I have this in a different way, or this is what's showing up for me. It works for whatever it is that you have going on. It's under 15 minutes, which I think is the best part, is that you can find 15 minutes in your day, whether that's in the morning before everybody wakes up or in the evening or whenever. And you can obviously reuse it at any time. You feel that old pattern potentially rising again, or, there's something new that you want to work on. But what's really important is that there is a place to start. And I do believe that building up our toolboxes and getting resourced is like the important step towards really starting to heal and to feel better and to get what you want and to getting more into cause so you can create more of what you want. But also keep in mind that while these things are very, very helpful to have and they'll be the first step, they are not necessarily, while they are starting to change at the identity level because you are actually rewiring your brain, there's a lot more in the journey, right? That is there, and that will need to be addressed. So if you want to check it out and you're ready to really feel really supported, right, from the inside out, just go to the link in the show notes, and it's you can get instant access to it. You'll be able to listen to it right away. And yeah, if you feel like, again, like if you feel like you've just been doing a lot for everyone, um, and would really just like to break that pattern and that burnout, I hope you check out that resource. And I hope this episode was helpful. If it was, I would love it if you like and subscribe or share it with a friend or family member. It really does a lot. Or leave a comment. Let me know what resonated for you. I would love to hear from you. And yeah, I hope that this was helpful. All right. I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.